Can people hear? I'm going to try a first small exercise in connectivity. I'm going to try and connect with you as the audience rather than staying on the stage. I hope that makes sense. And then I'm also hoping that that means that the clicker works. What I want to do in 20 minutes is very difficult, but talk about best practices in terms of how you're adopting technology and how you're managing the issue of connectivity. And I just want to raise a few thoughts with you as we discuss this issue. There's been a lot of interesting things. And the first half is just setting a little bit of context, and the second half is just to give you some thought-provoking ideas, perhaps, that you can implement in a very practical way. So look, this is the reality, I think, that all of you as SME owners are faced with. You know this game where you hit one thing on the head and another thing pops up? Does that sound familiar for your daily operations, whether it's the family concerns you have at home, or whether it's competitors, the staff giving you problems, etc. So that's the daily reality that all of you as SME owners encounter. So connectivity has to have some place in that, and I'm going to argue that there's certain best practices that you can use to make connectivity work for you. So let's try again. One of the things with forecasting, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about here, is some old quotes that I dug out, and you can see what the problem is with technology. In 1876, the telephone was said, the telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. This device is inherently no value to us, right? 1876. In 1943, Tom Watson, who was the founder of IBM, said, I think there's only going to be 5 mainframe computers, right? In 1957, here's an interesting one, data processing is a fad, right? In Bill Gates' 1981, said 640K should be enough for everybody. I think we'd laugh now. And so this is the thing about technology. It's which horse to pick. And what's actually happening in the context of big business, they're actually starting to spread their risk a bit. What's happening is they're not putting all the eggs on one basket. They're not just picking one system to fit everything. And the smart thing I always say to SME companies is, look what big companies are doing. The only difference between you and a big company is the amount of zeros there are in the numbers. And what big companies are doing now, they're placing more than one bet in terms of the technology because of the difficulty in forecasting. And that's what I would advise you to do. Consider having perhaps not just one system, but having perhaps a number of systems and technologies that can spread your risk a little bit, because things change very fast, as we can see from those quotes. Let me just go on to the next slide. Now, what I'd like you to ask is, here's a question for you. How ready are you for connectivity? How ready are you as a business for connectivity? 5 simple questions I'll ask you. You have a 3-year business plan. How many companies here have a 3-year business plan? Written 3-year business plan. How many don't? The majority don't. Now that's really scary. You as an SME business, you should have, there is no excuse not to have a 3-year written business plan. Think about that. The second one is, do you have a clear business case to support the investment in the technology? Have you a clear commercial case to make that 100,000 investment in an ERP system, or to make that 100,000 in a digital connectivity, whatever it is? Have you got a clear business case? If the case is not clear and proven, you should not do it. Third question, has the company got the requisite skills to implement all of this, both in terms of the quantity of skills and the actual capacity, the specific skills that they need to do? Do you have social media experts in your business? Do you have somebody who's able to handle all the data that connectivity is going to give you? If you don't have the people, you need to make sure that you do have the people. So people and the resources of people to implement any connectivity is really important as a checkpoint. The last one is, do you have the systems, the fourth one is, do you have the systems in place to manage the risks associated with connectivity? Have you a proper delegation of authority? That you are saying to people, yes, you can make decisions based on this data up to a certain value, up to a certain time frame, etc. If you have not delegated this authority and you have it properly written, you should not do it. And then the last one is a systematic process of consulting externally with other people. Vikram this morning, I thought, was very powerful in what he said, was he spent a year before he made the decision about doing his ERP, and he spoke to 20 or 30 companies. How many people here systematically go out and talk to 3 or 5 or 10 companies about making a big investment that you're going to make? Do people do that routinely? And the normal reason that's given for that is because I don't have time, I have busy other things and everything else. But you have to make time, because this is a really important point. And the point is with Vikram, he told us and he showed us very clearly, if you take time, you make wiser decisions. So as part of your readiness for connectivity, I would argue you have to consult with other people either in your industry or outside of your industry and ask them their experience about it. So there's a scoring there, and I can share this with Paul. If you're scoring low, you're not ready for connectivity. If you're scoring medium, you're getting ready. If you're scoring high, then you're in a good place to embrace connectivity. And you must be honest with yourself as you're answering these questions. Does that make sense? Now, I looked at best practice, and the best place for best practice is on the web. So I went and I read a few papers. I actually went and read about 20 papers preparing for this. And this was a really nice one, which is from a company called Epicor. And they wrote a white paper available on the web. And they wrote about things that you look for, what goes wrong in implementation of bad ERP systems. And 20 years ago, I was working with Cranfield University, and the professor of marketing there said to me, he said, ERP is the one thing that I guarantee you will bankrupt your business if it's not implemented properly. So this is some key learnings about and best practices from an international company about the things you need to have in place when you're implementing an ERP, and substitute ERP for any type of new technology, any type of connectivity infrastructure. Firstly, know why you're implementing it. Secondly, understand the key processes. It's like the story I told you about the golfing story. If you think technology is solving a particular problem, you actually have to understand what is the problem in your business. And I'll come to that in a second. Build a business case, and it must have a positive ROI. If you cannot prove the business case and you cannot make it very specific, you don't have a business case. And then ensure that there's proper project management and proper resources around implementing it. It's a project. It can take 6 months. I have one client who was looking, large client here, they were looking to spend 30 million dirhams on an ERP system. And the board of directors just simply didn't buy it. They just said, no way. So I was asked in to work with them as an outside pair of eyes, and we reduced the cost down to 5 million dirhams in terms of what they were actually needing in the business and to support that properly. So 1 million dirhams of support and 5 million dirhams of cost from an initial headline of 30 million. And if I can do it, I'm not a technical guy, but if I can do it, anyone can do it. So again, outside perspective, very important. Here's another few things that comes from this Epicor white paper as you're looking at technology, is gain the executive and organizational commitment. Many people here, how many people here would consider themselves technical experts on connectivity? Very few. And here we are talking about making big investments in connectivity, and 3 people in the room put their hand up. So it's really important to think about, if you have the right expertise in the business and you get at the executive level, that they understand it simply and clearly why they're doing it. And if you are owners and you don't understand it, don't do it. Recognize the value of early planning. And this is, again, before you get into the implementation phase, before you do things. It's like preparing for an IPO. An IPO is not a single event. It's the culmination of a lot of preparation and so on. So again, prepare yourself do the internal analysis, do the consultation to assess where you are and do that early preparation before you embrace the connectivity cost and effort. Focus on data migration. I'm sure one of the big things is you all have legacy systems, right? And again, it's often said, well, let's just load everything on. Why? You have to be very focused about what data you need. And some people say, well, I have to have that last 10 years of customer information. No. And the migration of the data will define to some extent the complexity of the project and the cost. So again, think about what information you need to take forward with you as you're moving forward. And then the last piece, and the piece I really would make clear, is when you're bringing in new technology, test and ask the question, are we bringing in new ways of working to go with that technology? And part of new ways of working is you have to talk to your employees, you have to train them, you have to take them through a process of change. So you're bringing in new technology and asking employees to do the same thing doesn't make sense. Does that make sense? Yeah? So you have to be prepared to, so all of these aspects are concerned with making a decision to go yes or no with connectivity. And this is a very good paper I urge you to read, Epicor. So let me see if I can flick on to another piece here. So here's a few thoughts on implementation, which I hope will help you. Connectivity and risk management. One of the starting points I would say is rather than saying technology is great, I would reverse it and go into a particular area. Look at the risks in your business. What are the risks that you have in your business? And these can be risks in terms of customers, suppliers, employees, finance risks, the environment, the ownership, succession planning, things like intellectual property, your office and location. You can have other things like the information technology use, legal compliance, whole load of risks. How many people here have a written document which lists the risks in their business? 1, 2. When you start to list the risks in your business, you understand where the pain points are. And there's 2 side benefits for that. One is it's actually compiling a thing called a risk register. And then when you're aware of your risks, you can then start to develop a plan to mitigate those risks. But more importantly, as far as connectivity is concerned, you're actually identifying where is the priority in your business that you perhaps can use connectivity to solve a problem. It might be customer retention is a big risk for you. And perhaps by getting connected in a certain way, database management, it may help you retain customers. So that's a good priority. So my basic point here is, and it goes back to the old saying of my grandfather, measure twice and cut once. So look at risk as a starting point for looking at connectivity. List the risks you have in your business. It's very easy to do. And then say, well, how can technology help me solve one of those risks or one or more of those risks? Does that make sense? Yeah? So let me just give you another thought then. The second one is a business plan. If people don't have a business plan, I just don't understand how people can run a business without a 3-year business plan. I really don't. And it's a very, very simple thing to do. And here's another question. Does anyone have a single 1-page statement of what their vision is for the business? Yeah? And that doesn't mean I want to be the best company in the world, or I want to sell the best cookies to this place or whatever. It's a very specific business place saying, what are my financial objectives? Which geographies I'm going to work in? How am I going to manage my staff? What are the key positions in the business? Which will I not do? Which will I do? What are the values of the business? What's my exit strategy? All of those things should be in your vision statement, and that's a 1 or 2 pager. Then you have the starting point for how connectivity fits in your business, and of course you have the starting point to make your business plan. Because your business plan should be connected to your vision, right? The second thing that I'd say to you is, ask you a question is, how many people have a board in their business? An actual functioning board. All right? Okay, there's a few. Most companies in the UAE, you need 2 people, 2 individuals to form a board. Again, just like a business plan, I cannot understand how people do not have a formally constituted board in their business. And that's not just the tick in the box that you need to register the company, but an actual board that works and is engaged in the business. And it may mean you're wearing two hats. You can be an owner and a board director, no problem. But the board discussions you have 4 times a year are very different from the owner discussions you have. So please consider, as part of your connectivity strategy, is ask the basic question, stepping back. You should form a board in your business and start to implement good governance, because then these types of decisions will go through a process that will help you make wise decisions. Yes? Yeah, a board is there to supervise management. And the only way you can supervise management is if they have a plan, right? That they have targets. So that's the difference. Shareholders are owners, and they're making the big decisions. Will I stay in the business? Will I exit the business? Very, very high-level decision. Certain decisions will come to the board based on the articles of association or the types of decision the board should debate. And then the management is the level down. The board is there in the middle. Now, you can be the same, but in the board discussions, you have very, very specific discussions, and you have minutes of the meeting and all the rest of it. So I'd urge you, as part of the process, is to look at setting up a formal board in your businesses. That way you'll make wise decisions. And then, of course, you measure it. So this is just the process. Have a business plan and have a governance structure. That's what I'm saying. Now, very quickly, there's a guy called Michael Gerber, and he wrote a great book as to why small businesses fail. It's called The E-Myth. I don't know if people know it. In that book, he talks about 3 characters. He talks about the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the person who sets out the vision, who actually says, this is where we're going as a business. The second person is the manager, the person who manages the business, the systems, the processes, and so on. And then the third person is the technician. And the technician is the person who makes the stuff, who delivers the stuff, who does the stuff. Now, I have seen many companies, and I'm sure you all have, most people as SMEs and a lot of chief executives think they're all 3, correct? Most people think they are all 3. And I have never, having met thousands of business leaders and dealt with hundreds of companies, I've never met a single person who is all 3. Now, the minute you make that self-realization, you can then go on to a very, very important point, which is about making the team that's going to help you implement connectivity. I asked the question earlier, who are the experts in social media in this room? Nobody put their hand up. So that's a gap in your team. So you fill that gap by bringing on board and realizing you're not an expert in everything. Does that make sense? So it's really important in that. And then when you have your team, what you do is you make sure you hold them accountable, you give them specific metrics, and then you can move forward. So make the team. The last thing I'm going to say is the concept of an advisory board. And an advisory board, I think, is a really useful tool for SMEs. An advisory board is a group of 2 or 3, maybe 4 people. They have no legal or fiduciary responsibilities regarding the company. But what you're doing is you're formalizing those discussions with friends or industry experts and so on, and you're bringing them on board as an advisory board. And then you can engage them in a structured way under a contract, and you are bringing in expertise into your company in a way that doesn't affect your shareholding. It doesn't affect them influencing the way the business is run, but you're bringing them on board. And by the way, advisory boards are a very good place to test potential future directors or future investors for your business. And my argument is, in terms of good governance, don't just have informal discussions about advisory boards, formalize it. Have a proper contract, have 2 or 3 people who are filling skills gaps in your business, and then you can move forward with them. And give them some skin in the game, as they say. Give them either some fees, or they have some sort of a stake in the future success of your business, a profit share or something else like that. So bring on board advisors. The best advice I ever got about advisors was an old quote from Oscar Wilde, one of my fellow Irishmen. And he said, when I was 18, I thought I knew everything. I thought my father knew nothing. But by the time I was 21, I was amazed how much my father had learned. Does that make sense? And sometimes when you're starting off on an SME on your journey, a lot of people think they know a lot. And that's understandable and that's fantastic. But the benefit of having outside advice, and it's been a big theme this morning, the benefit of using outside advice will accelerate your journey. It won't slow it down. And 3 things to select advisors. The best management tool here, shui shui. Take it slowly, right? Secondly, build a trust with them in terms of the advisors. And thirdly, give them some skin in the game. And I would also say, as you're selecting, it was asked a question earlier, how do we select advisors? Tell them to provide 3 references in the last 3 months for 3 similar projects that they're asking you to engage them on. That normally is a very good filter to separate people who can prove it or not. Ask for 3 references from the last 3 months on their experience with other customers. Then you really start to slim down the field, okay? So I'm just finishing up now, Paul, and I will take one. So there's a summary of, oops, can I just go back 1 slide? Yeah, that's the summary of what I would say in terms of some best practices for connectivity. I hope it's thought-provoking for you. Have a business plan, have a board, have good governance structures. Secondly, use risk as a way of defining if you need connectivity and what type of connectivity you need. Build the team. Look at taking an advisory board and always use best practice. The point of best practice is somebody somewhere has done it before and most likely better than you. So with that, thanks very much for your attention. I hope it was useful. Thanks very much.
John, thanks very much for a very thought-provoking, very interactive presentation. Can I just ask you, you mentioned the role of risk, the risk factor. Is it the case that in a world of connectivity, risks increase commensurately?
I think it is. And it's that famous, was it Donald Rumsfeld, the US Defense, he said the unknown unknowns. Do you remember that discussion? And I think that's the worrying thing about risk is when you embrace new technology and new connectivity, you may not even be aware of what the risks are. And you may not even be able to say, well, how are we going to deal with them? But I'm not saying don't embrace new technology. What I'm saying is if you consult wisely, if you have it as part of your business plan, part of your strategy, technology must happen and you must embrace it. And all my argument is to do it wisely, look at the risks involved in it, and then plan accordingly. And I think, as you say, Paul, risks are increasing, but if you're really smart, you can mitigate those risks.
John, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Huge round of applause, please.